I am Charles Susano. I've been asked by the Knoxville Bar Association to interview John O'Connor as a part of the KBA's Legal History Project. This video will be included in the archives of the legal history and available to the public at the KBA or online. We will now proceed with the interview. State your full name, please.
John Thomas O'Connor II.
And where do you live, John?
I live here in Knoxville on
Are you
Shady
married?
Land Drive, 1200, 37919. And I'm married to Betsy O'Connor, whom I met in law school.
And I want to get into that a little bit later. Let's sort of go back to the beginning. Where were you born, and when were you born?
I was born here in Knoxville, July 19, 1935.
And what were your parents' names?
Thomas Anthony was my father, O'Connor, and my mother was Esther. I always stumble on her maiden name. I'll think.
Davidson?
Davidson. She was Esther Mary Davidson, yeah. And she was a farm girl, and apparently some teacher in a one-room schoolhouse thought she could do better than that and arranged to have her live with a family here in Knoxville. And she went to Knoxville High. My dad was in Knoxville High. And she ultimately graduated, and they were married and started a family. And
How many siblings did you have?
did she have?
No, yes, did she have?
Yeah, she had a sister named Lucy.
No, I'm sorry. I was thinking more about you.
Okay.
In terms of children of their marriage.
Mm-hmm.
So how many were their children?
There were 6.
6 children.
I was the eldest.
Now, did your mother work outside the home?
She didn't. I don't remember that she worked outside the home, honestly. I may have known some kind of a part-time job she might have had, but she actually, as I said, she lived with a family, and I don't know how that connection was made, but she was treated like a child. And
What did your father do, John?
well, let's see. He ultimately became a salesman. He did have a period of time with TVA. Of course, he was not schooled as an engineer or anything like that, but he had some job with TVA. He quickly, I think, realized that he was going to have to make more money than as the family grew, and he got a sales job with C.M. McClung, and had a territory, and he traveled the territory, and sometimes was out overnight, and other times he didn't have to do that. And,
Now, there came a time when you all moved from Knox County, is that right?
That's true.
And later came back to Knox County.
Yes.
And where did you live in between?
Well, we moved to Elizabethton. We moved to Cleveland. Both moves precipitated by his job. And then apparently he rose to a level of competence that enabled him to either apply for or just have offered the same kind of job, but up in Knoxville. And he had a territory which he drove his car, but he was home at night and that sort of thing.
Now, when did you move back to Knoxville again?
We moved back to Knoxville when I was in, well, let's see, I went to St. Elizabeth School in Elizabethton. I was in the 8th grade there. I was the only boy in a class of 5 in the 8th grade. And then after the 8th grade, I went to, I started high school, Carter County High School in Elizabethton. He moved again, and we moved to Cleveland, and I was in an elementary school in Bradley County, and I observed a lot of interesting things. It wasn't that far from a Catholic school in some ways, because in one of those places it was mandatory that you read a passage from the Bible to start the day, and then ultimately we came back up here, and since I had been out at Holy Ghost for the first 4 years and 3 years up on the hill, Immaculate Conception, I knew all my classmates, and it was kind of a funny trip through several years of life, and of course I got.
Now, did you when you moved back here? Did you start your junior year at Catholic or your senior year?
No, I started my junior year.
Junior year.
Yeah.
And so you were at Catholic for 2 years.
And
then you graduated in 1953?
53.
Okay. Now, did you go directly to college after that?
Well, let's see. I did enroll at UT, and as I said, my dad was a salesman, so I pursued a degree in the College of Business, and spent a couple of years there, and I did apply for some jobs after the 2 years, and I applied for a job with Procter & Gamble, and I got the job. It was a job traveling in East Tennessee I was out calling on maybe small grocery stores. I might have had a larger store occasionally. There were no chain stores in this area, as far as I know. And after a year, I didn't like that. and I decided that I'd give up that job, which my dad thought was a little something more than he expected. But
Did you go back to UT at that point?
I didn't. Let me get this straight. I did go back to UT, and at that point in time, I got this job with Procter & Gamble. But as I said, I didn't care for the job, and I resigned. And
So then did you finish at UT?
not at that point. Well, no, I did. I got a degree in business. Yeah, I did.
Now, after that, do I remember that you went into the military?
Yes,
And was that in the Army?
it was in the Army. Actually, I joined the Army for a 3-year term, and I've forgotten what was going on at that time, but my reasoning was that there would be some sort of actual activity in the Army. I've forgotten who we were tinkering around with, but
That's during the Cold War.
it was. So I ended up at Fort Sill, which was an artillery location, and I learned to deal with the big guns and that sort of thing. And I finally got a second lieutenant appointment
That was
after I'd gone to OCS.
OCS,
Yeah.
okay.
And
Now, did you do your service in the States?
yes, I did.
Okay.
I did. I went to, let's see, where did I go? I missed the initial camp that I went to, but I do remember that Elvis Presley had been stationed at that camp, but left a week before I got there to go to Germany. And Elvis continued his career over there. And, I didn't ever, I don't think, entertain the idea that I'd make a career in the military. But I had an uncle, my mother's brother, who did. He was just a ground soldier and when he would come in and had been maybe in stationed somewhere in Europe, he'd come back and show us trinkets and stuff that he had obtained. And
Now, after you fulfilled your military obligation, did you then next go to law school?
yeah, it was at that point that I started thinking about going to law school. I've forgotten what.
Well, let's explore that just a minute.
Mhm.
What was your reason for going to law school, or did you have any particular goal in mind when you went?
Well, I was much impressed with John Kennedy, and I admired him, as a matter of fact, and thought maybe I might be able to enter the arena, kind of a candidate for something, since my grandfather had been in that position. And
Yeah, I want to talk a little bit later about him. So you went to law school, and then Betsy was also in law school.
she was.
And did you all graduate at the same time?
I think she graduated maybe a quarter before I did.
UT was on the quarter system then.
I think so, yeah.
And Betsy later became a librarian, a law school librarian, did she not?
Yes, she did. She went back and got a degree in library science, and she still is connected with the local library. She goes up and maybe serves sometimes half a day, twice a week, and she's dealing with the I've forgotten what they call it, but with the books that people donate, and the way I understand it is has the task of getting them located in the proper part of the library, or perhaps allowing somebody to take a book out.
Now, she never sat for the bar, though, did she, John?
No, she didn't. No.
And never practiced law
No,
then,
no,
obviously.
no.
How many children did you and Betsy have?
Well, we had Matthew, and we had John, and we had Mary Virginia, and that was it.
And how many grandchildren do you have?
We have 4. We have twin grandsons in Terre Haute, Indiana, and we have twin grandsons in New City, New York.
That's Mary Virginia's
Yes.
children?
Uh-huh. We keep hoping somebody will have a girl. Well, they're all boys so far.
Now, let me, before we get any further, let me ask you a little bit about your family's history. I notice your name is John Thomas O'Connor II, and you were the first of the grandchildren of Mayor John Thomas O'Connor.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes.
And how many grandchildren did he have?
Ultimately had 22. Charlie had, who incidentally had studied for the priesthood and came out. He had also been in the military. I think 3 of them were, of the boys were in the military during the tail end of the war. And in any event, Charlie decided the priesthood wasn't for him, and he married my Aunt Jean, and they had 12 children. Jim had 5, I think. Joe just had 2, and John had 2. But altogether, we could make a crowd.
Now, the gentleman, your grandfather, that you were named for, was mayor of Knoxville.
Yes, he was.
And you were telling me before we started the video that he ran for Congress in the 2nd Congressional District at one point.
He did.
And why don't you tell us a little bit about what you've heard about that race? I thought that would be interesting. He was a Democrat.
He was a Democrat, yeah, no doubt. Knoxville, Knox County, had a representative in Congress named J. Will Taylor. I used to know where his house was out on Kingston Pike, but he had essentially captured that seat. The Democrats didn't have a lot of power. He was a Democrat, and in any event, my grandfather ran for Congress, and I was told by some of the old lawyers when they saw my name, at least one of them called me in and said, "I'd like to talk with you. I want to tell you some things about your grandfather." We were supporting him, and we don't feel that it was an honest election, that a ballot box, or some, I've forgotten which, disappeared for a few days, and 4 or 5 days. And when it turned up, there were just enough votes to send his opponent back to Congress. And I think I mentioned that some of them told him that the election had been stolen from him and that they could steal it back, and he was not interested in doing that. But my grandfather, he was really interested in I would say the common man. I believe I'm correct that he lobbied in Nashville for the initial Workers' Compensation Act in Tennessee. I really should verify that, but that's what I was told, and I know that he made trips over there, and might be gone 2 or 3 days if the legislature was in. And something I should have done. I understand that he addressed the House of Representatives and over there in favor of that piece of legislation, and maybe on other matters. I just know that he traveled to Washington, and he traveled to Nashville. And was apparently successful in some parts of his activity over there.
And he met President Roosevelt, I think you told me.
Yeah, he did. I've seen it, and I've got to try to search it out, but I've seen a copy of the two of them, of a picture of the two of them sitting side by side in an open air car in the back seat. And whether they were going to the Smoky Mountains, I don't know, or to see the work of TVA. I don't know about that, but he was pushing both of those.
Yeah. You had graduated from law school, and I think you must have gotten out about 63, because I got out in 64, and I think you were ahead of me.
I always have to calculate that.
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah.
And took and passed the bar and became licensed. And did you start practicing law immediately after law school, or did you have some interim jobs?
No, I took a job as a claims adjuster with Travelers Insurance Company for a period of time. They were paying well, and I thought it was a job that I could use in a career as a lawyer. And I was with them about 3 years, but at that point in time, I decided I maybe ought to head in the direction of being a lawyer. But as I said, with Travelers, I was an adjuster. And I think that covers.
You went to work for the state a little
I
while.
did. I was employed by Judge or Attorney General McCandless. He gave me the job of contacting lawyers in East Tennessee who were in some way or another active in the acquisition of land for the interstate highway, and I was General McCandless' connection between those lawyers and his office. So I did that for maybe a year and a half. I don't know. Could have stayed longer. General McCandless kind of wanted to, or asked me when I told him I was going to enter the practice of law. He said, "Well, who have you? Do you have a connection, or do you?" And I told him who I had made a connection with, which was the Child firm, and he thought I could do better.
Now,
But
I didn't ask you when you got married, but you were married after law school, right?
Yeah.
What year did you get married?
Well, we've been married. I think it's 44 years now.
Right. All right. So then, moving to the practice of law, I think it was about 1969 when you became associated with a firm that was then called Child and Child.
It was.
And which of the Child family was in practice when you went to work there, John?
Well, Papa Child was. He had, I guess, started the firm in the maybe late 20s or something, I was understood. And George was there. And
Later
Bob
became a judge.
Yeah. and Bob was there. And they had another brother. It might have been named Jack, I'm not sure. But, and I don't think he was not a lawyer, or if he was, had not been practicing there during the period of time that I knew about them. But in any event, I didn't necessarily want to do a lot of divorce work, but I did a fair amount, and Bob was good about. He had a broad clientele, and even though the connection might have been through his domestic relations work, his clients a lot of times would call him, on if they've got maybe an automobile injury or something like that, and he had the guy that went to.
And then there also was a time, as I recall, that you were a part-time prosecutor on the staff of Attorney General Ron Webster.
I was.
And Ron had been in law school with you and me.
Right.
And but that was just a part. You kept your regular practice, didn't you?
Right. And I got paid by the state, and I still have a little retirement.
From the state?
Yeah.
And so how long were you a prosecutor?
I probably did it at least 2 years, and maybe part of a third.
Now, as I understand it, you also at some point taught business law at UT.
I did in the night school.
How long was that?
I probably had 2 or 3 sessions of that, and got exposed to the students.
Now, I know there were other lawyers that came along after that, Charles Child and Bill Petty and some others. I want to go here to 1988, when you became the diocesan attorney for the Diocese of Knoxville.
Mm-hmm.
Now, was that at the time the diocese was either formed or was in the process of being formed?
It was.
You were intimately involved in that process, were you not?
Yeah, I was. The very first day they went into business, so to speak, I was there, and we our first activity. I made 3 or 4 trips to Nashville. Sometimes I had one of the priests with me, and sometimes I didn't. But we were kind of cutting up the pie. Because we were going to take a substantial part of the Diocese of Nashville, east of Nashville, and the Diocese of Memphis also had part of the rest of Tennessee. So I met their lawyers, and we periodically, I was going regularly over there, occasionally spending a night, and most times not. But we had these meetings, and then finally we had apportioned the property that Nashville had held, and some of the assets that they had, and at that point, those meetings ceased, and I became a member of the Diocesan Attorneys National Organization, and I went to any number of locations, for they usually had a 5-day a year session or meeting where topics of interest and help were presented by veteran lawyers, and a lot of times a priest who was also had some legal knowledge. But I've still got some things at home, that notebooks and things that I took, and I'm in the process of throwing all that stuff away. But
how long were you the attorney for the diocese?
22, 23 years. The first part of.
Now, I remember vividly that you received an outstanding award from the Vatican, and tell us about that.
Well, that